I'm trying to think of where I was when we got the call that it was happening.
And I'll never forget that night when I got called and saying, hey, there's smoke and everything's clouding up the freeway.
Little did I know that 4 days later, I would finally come home. It was quite an experience.
All the fires around the county actually started the same night. That was quite unusual. That was the first time that had really happened for us here in San Diego. Having volunteered for the Red Cross for a while, I knew, there's going to be shelters opening, there's going to be people losing their homes, and how big and bad is this going to get? So as it turned out, at the time, it was the worst fire in California history.
I got a call probably 1 o'clock in the morning that we were opening a shelter. And that's a call you're never really happy to get. So I decided, for some reason, I thought, maybe I better stay awake and keep an eye on this thing. Well, within an hour, she said, we have 2 shelters open, and I knew this was not going to be a good thing.
I get the call, I go into headquarters, thinking nothing of it other than at 4 in the morning as I'm driving on the freeway, ash is falling on the windshield. I'm like, well, this is peculiar, but still having no idea how big the event is.
We weren't aware how bad it was at that point in time. Next thing I know, we end up with 2,000 people needing shelter. We have to find supplies for them. The roads are now cut off. People can't come in the normal ways down the freeway.
As soon as I get to the 163-15 merge, all of a sudden the cars are now coming at me because they're being turned around. There is a fire, 50-foot wall of fire on both sides of the freeway. You would figure 10 lanes of freeway should be a perfect fire break, and it wasn't. So it just showed the devastation of that fire immediately, that this was huge.
Nobody had any idea that that fire would move so fast, that it would move all the way from Ramona down through the Poway area and into Scripps Ranch. So I learned early in the morning that my own neighborhood was evacuated. There was no way for me to get down there, and there was nothing I was worried about in the house with the exception of my dog.
We had client casework, Red Cross volunteers going out with the county to actually evaluate what the damage was, where the most houses were lost, what kind of damage each house had. And we actually worked with the county to make a very large notebook on that, so we would have a record of what had happened, because it really was not until months later that we started the recovery. But the Red Cross was right there from the get-go.
Probably actually stood at the sites of, raw guesstimate, it'd be 2,500 homes that were either burning or had just burned or were going to burn, because we were way out front.
So now everything is gone. There's not a tree, there's not a shrub, even the ground looked burned. The ground was actually black. And if you've never seen that, it's quite shocking. It's almost like a moonscape to see that.
Children looking for actually having their toys laid out. There was usually nothing left of the house, but they had found some of their toys. And I remember they would have them kind of arranged by the order of damage as they were playing with them. And of course we were carrying water and other supplies in our vehicles, and we would leave that and catch up with Red Cross canteen someplace and resupply.
Unless you've lost absolutely everything, I don't think you can have a real good idea of how that feels. So people were devastated. They were looking through piles of ash to find any little treasure that they could keep, even if it was a broken saucer for a teacup or a ring that was half melted, just anything that they could keep.
What kept you going?
Adrenaline and knowing that we needed to get it done. I had a bed to go home to. Not everybody did. We actually had a volunteer here who lost her house. We had several, but she came to work one day just because there was nothing else for her to do.
Just really watching the community come together, Restaurants brought over barbecue pits so we could start cooking food. Nurses and doctors showed up. They were displaced, and we put them together to make our health services team work for the shelter. And
an enormous number of spontaneous volunteers show up on the doorstep. And they wound all the way around the building, down the street, down around the alley. It was just, it was just crazy.
Remember the radio station, Jeff and Jer had this, had a drive-by thing in the morning. There was a motorhome, and everybody had a window of a couple hours to drive by and make donations. We had to hire a security guard to stand at my office as we brought all the money up, and it was in boxes. It was in Home Depot 5-gallon bins.
You know, they had lost absolutely all their mementos, absolutely everything that they had had, but we helped them get their home rebuilt, and you know, it's a really emotional thing for people. So whenever we were able to get a house done and someone was able to get the keys and go back in, we'd always have a dedication ceremony, and every agency that had assisted would come, and we would celebrate, you know, that they had a new home, and there would, you know, be tears of joy. It was really a beautiful thing.
you get to see how not only how the Red Cross and the volunteers who have trained come together, but how the community starts to come together when you talk to them about what are the problems, what can you do to help us, and make it all happen. And of course we did.
Get out there and support the community, and you know, just do our job. And I think everybody really responded well to that.
How the people of San Diego and California and probably around the country donated funds so we would be able to help, you know, help the clients get back into their homes.
Every hand is on deck. Everyone steps forward to help at the time you need the most. It's a major test, and I'd like to think we passed that test pretty well.